Hello, welcome back to Board Game TV. We are at year 4 of our History of Comics, The Spectre, the third series. And this would kick off with the Haunting of America storyline. It would actually be 14 issues, the longest major storyline in the book. Also, probably the most controversial, the most preachy, and the most lazy writing, as a matter of fact. Ironically, DC would promote the book at this time, saying this is a great new point for new readers to jump on, but a lot of people I know kind of jumped ship around this time because of the preachiness of the book. It is my least favorite storyline of the series, and there's very little supernatural to go with it. They took a big turn from dealing with all the supernatural stuff that had been going on and try to take a more non-supernatural, I guess, approach to the villains and the bad guys and stuff in this series. And while that is a good idea, and I'm not saying this is a terrible storyline, and I'm not saying that John is overly preachy. I don't agree with some of the stuff he condones in this. He's nowhere near as heavy-handed as they are today, okay? But back then, this was considered a little bit preachy. There's some good ideas, but there's also a lot of lazy writing, and that's because of the overly put my politics ahead of the story type thing. So, but you can tell this was a passion project for John to talk about these and touch on these issues. Unfortunately, as well as it had some good ideas, it just didn't work out as good as I think he wanted it to. And for me, it's kind of another big problem with this is it was just too long. I mean, you know, you're reading a book, The Spectre, you're supposed to deal with supernatural stuff. Taking a break from it from now and then is fine, but 14 issues, it was just too long. The storyline was just too long overall. So, and it's very convoluted, so I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. It starts with Nate Kane getting shot in the back 2 times and being put in a coma. Jim tries to figure out what's going on. And, of course, you know, he tries to enter Nate's soul to figure out what's going on. He only gets glimpses of it. And he almost kills Nate in the process doing it. And this is the first step of the lazy writing. But we need the story to progress. So Nate's got to be in a coma for a while. And Jim can't know what's going on. Why he just doesn't heal Nate, I don't know. But like I said, it doesn't kind of make as much sense. So apparently this is related to an old case of Nate's about this fragment of this piece called the American Talisman. Now, Professor Nicodemus is back, and he kind of working with Nate to figure out the mystery of it. So he goes into the dream world again to try to learn about the history of the American Talisman. And basically what it is when the founders of the country got together, they wanted to make a living embodiment of this country. And so they had this talisman, and they used alchemy or whatever, sorcery, whatever, and created a living embodiment of this country to protect the country. And for a while it worked. The talisman was strong and pure. It was responsible for the creation of the Minuteman, Brother Jonah, Johnny Reb, Uncle Sam. So the superhero Uncle Sam is from the American Talisman. And in times of great need, the talisman will manifest, and Uncle Sam would come out at one time, and that's the origin of Uncle Sam and fight for America and stuff like that. It's a rather simplified explanation. But over the years, the talisman became fragmented because of the injustices and stuff from this country, like slavery, the Civil Rights Act, the Civil War. And so the talisman got broken up into little pieces, and people who can get a piece of this talisman can bring forth manifestations of it and try to some do it accidentally. They don't realize they're doing it, and some people can do it, you know, on purpose. And there's this group of white supremacists, again, lazy writing, that are ancestors of the founders. They call themselves the national interest. And basically, they want this country to go back to the way it was. No foreigners and stuff like that. They are hunting down pieces of the talisman. In order to do that, they kind of, this is where it kind of gets a little weird, they create this being called Shadrach. Shadrach is basically a clone from alchemy or something. I don't, it's not really clear. And Shadrach is from DNA from one of the founders of the country. I don't know. They use him to go find pieces of the talisman. Shadrach has no soul. He's like, he calls himself a living corporation. So he comes across, he finds out about Professor Nicodemus, and he tries to kill him while Nicodemus is learning the history of the talisman and stuff like that in the dream world. Shadrach can apparently go into the dream world and go wherever and be in the real world at the same time. So he's trying to kill Nicodemus in the dream world, but the spectre kind of saves him, and the spectre and Shadrach fight, but Shadrach wins. He beats the spectre. The spectre tries to go in his soul, and he realizes Shadrach has no soul, and Shadrach says, well, I'm a corporation, you know, we have no soul. This is, I guess, John's take on corporations. And so the spectre really can't do anything to him, and so Shadrach just walks away and leaves, and the spectre's like, yeah, well, I gotta figure out some other way about getting this. So eventually what the series becomes is a race between the spectre and the national interest group to find pieces of the talisman. And that's basically the bulk of the story. Now Nate Kane would recover and come back and help out. Professor Nicodemus would help out some, and it would even get a little even more weirder to the end. But basically, the spectre gets a piece of the talisman, fights off this corrupt version of Uncle Sam and stuff like that, and it explains the origins of stuff like Uncle Sam, like I said. So the first big part is taking on, again, corporate pirates. So there's this piece of the talisman that the spectre comes across when he accidentally comes across Captain Fear. Captain Fear is this ghost pirate doomed to roam the seas for all eternity because of a curse. And whoever's on the boat loses their memory, and the spectre loses his memory. And it's kind of forgettable. It really kind of is. It's basically the reincarnation of the guy who cursed Captain Fear is now a corporate pirate, and Captain Fear is heading towards the skyscrapers. And there's this big pirate ship spirit ghost fight with the guy, and eventually it ends up. It's just a take on corporate piracy, and the spectre gets a piece of the talisman. The next part of the storyline has to do with slavery. We get a flashback to Jim Corrigan's youth when his preacher of a father, who was a temp preacher, and Corrigan never got along with his father. He hated his father because his father was a hard, brutal man. Well, his father had a maid or an assistant, and she was a black lady, and she had a son named Raffy, and him and Raffy were friends growing up. So because of this, Jim Corrigan is not racist towards black people, while everybody else is. That's kind of the implication here. So we get that little flashback, and we come to meet this black couple, this black guy and this black lady, and they have a kid together, and they're in the midst of getting a divorce. The black guy, we'll just say his name is William or whatever, and the black lady has one of those African names. She's hardcore Afrocentric. She's, you know, white man, slavery, Africa's the greatest nation on earth. She wears the African stuff, and that kind of stuff. Well, the husband, he's not like that at all. He's working at a corporation. He's a business guy. He doesn't want to have nothing to do with any of that kind of thoughts and stuff. And they're arguing all the time about it. And that's most likely why they got a divorce. And basically, she's always spouting about how her people and his people always went through injustices. And she calls him by his African name. And he's sitting there going, and he tells her, look, I never been in Africa. I don't know any slaves. We've never been a slave. Okay, yeah, I respect what my ancestors did, but look, I just don't want to live that kind of life. Well, they have this little daughter, and they're at the corporation. The little daughter has a piece of the talisman somehow. And the corporation, guy who built the building many, many, many years ago, built it on top of a mass grave full of African slaves who were killed. And when they were building the building, they found out about the bodies, and the guy who built the building was like, they're just black people, they don't matter anyways, I'm going to build my building on top of it and everything. So the spirits of the deceased African slaves, because of the talisman's presence, start roaming free and start basically killing all the white people in the building. But they leave the black couple and their daughter alone. They leave all the black people in there alone, actually. And the white people are going, look, you know, they're being driven insane by them. They're like, look, what do you want? You know, I had nothing to do with slavery and all that kind of stuff. And so the specter arrives to try to take care of the situation. And Shadrach arrives as well. And Shadrach is unaffected by the African spirits trying to hurt him. They can't hurt him whatsoever. And him and the specter get in a confrontation. Shadrach walks up to the little girl, the black little girl, puts a gun to her head and basically tells her if he don't give her a piece of the talisman, she's going to be joining all the spirits around here. And so she ends up getting the talisman, but the specter, this time he's able to beat Shadrach. He cuts him up in a bunch of pieces, but the hand gets away. The hand gets away with a piece of the talisman. And it goes back to the national interest people. They try to recreate another version of Shadrach using the leftover DNA from the hand, but they're unable to. The next part is deals with the glass ceiling. So turns out Madame Xandu's daughter is a publisher or editor for a major book company. She just got passed over a promotion, and she's basically saying she got passed over because she's a woman. The corporate people are like, no, you're not. We didn't pass you over for a woman because you're a woman. We just don't think you're talented enough. And she's basically a feminist, and they basically don't want her on the board to give her the promotion because all she would do all the time is bitch and moan and complain. And that's basically kind of what they say. And they kind of have a point because she's so in your face about it. Who wants to hear that all the time? But then again, if she's talented enough, they should give her the job. So she's doing a book on the Salem witch trials. And she finds a piece of the talisman and it manifests its power. So she starts trying to get revenge on the corporate people, the corporate men who have passed her over, and start trying to kill them and stuff. About this time, Nate Kane is recovered and better, and he goes with the specter to the building to go help him. And because of the talisman, it's distorting time, and Nate's in and out of the time of the Salem witch trials and then into the regular art time, and getting in fights with Puritans and stuff like that. The specter is going to punish her, but Madame Xandu comes forward and, you know, basically fights, challenges the specter, says, look, this is my daughter. I want to try to build a relationship with her. You're not going to do anything to her. And so they kind of get into a little bit of a pissing contest, but she kind of wins out. She kind of makes her daughter stop hurting people and give the specter a piece of the talisman, and then she's going to train her daughter to be a strong, powerful woman who needs no man, basically. So that's basically that one. So the next one deals with homosexuality. There's this reverend who's fire and brimstone type as well, and he's preaching against the evils of homosexuality, and he brings up, you know, Leviticus, where it says to kill homosexuals, you know, don't tolerate that kind of stuff. And his followers are going out and they're beating up homosexuals. Well, the specter comes across this, but he doesn't really punish the guys beating up the homosexuals. The specter says, look, in my day, you kept your business private. You didn't come out with it like that. And Nate kind of gets on him a little bit for being a little easy on the guys who beat him up. So the specter starts questioning himself. And so he goes and visits Michael. Michael says, look, there's souls up here that have done all kinds of sins. Once you've been forgiven and stuff like that, and seek redemption, what does it matter? And so you kind of see, he kind of brings up both points. He quotes the Bible where in the Old Testament and stuff like that, where it says kill homosexuals, but he brings up the thing where, if you truly repent, you're forgiven of your sins type thing. So he's kind of even on that. So a specter goes to visit this reverend, and he asks the reverend, hey, look, are you sending out your followers to go beat up these guys? And everyone's like, no, I don't send them out to do it. If they do it, hey, it's fine. It's what they're supposed to do, is what the Bible says. But no, I don't send them out. At that point in time, some homosexuals go for firebomb Reverend's church. The Reverend's in there. The Reverend just happened to have a piece of the talisman in this sword he has. And so the talisman turns him kind of like into this archangel. And he's going to go kill the homosexuals. But the specter stops him from doing it and fights him. And the specter's fixing about to punish him, but the homosexual guys say, look, no, don't do it. We got to ask forgiveness too. We shouldn't have firebombed this place. We shouldn't have did this. If we want to be peace with each other, we got to learn to understand each other and that type of thing. Of course, today's radical homosexuals wouldn't be like that. They'd firebomb the place and have a party about doing it. But this was back in the 90s when people weren't radical about anything. People were more easygoing about stuff. So, and then you kind of get the last one, which has to do with the Native Americans. And this kind of starts to lead into the conclusion of the storyline. And it's basically this guy, this Indian guy has a piece of the American talisman. And it's time for the Indians to take back the country. So he's using the talisman to raise the spirits of dead Indians to come back and take this country back. And yeah, so there's that. So while this has been going on, you come to learn more about the National Interest Group. They found an alien life form, but it's kind of like a alien armor suit or something that was found at Area 51 in the 50s. And one of the members of the group, a direct ancestor of one of the founders of the country, was a member of the group. He touched the alien life form thing and then went into a coma. So basically, he's inside the alien life form battle suit thing, but he doesn't remember who he is. He thinks he's just been reprogrammed and all this kind of stuff. And the National Interest is controlling the alien battle suit type thing, but he's starting to figure out who he was, and he's kind of starting to rebel against him. We also meet this Indian character who was kind of a mentor to Jim Corrigan while he was growing up. So Jim's not racist towards Indians, while everybody else is. And he tells him about a prophecy that, that the sun's going to die, you got to keep the earth alive and all this kind of stuff. And after the sun dies, the Great War will begin. Of course, he's very cryptic about his thing. So the thing he's talking about is the Final Night crossover. Now, DC had a big Final Night event crossover. And all the DC hero books at that time had a Final Night issue. And it's basically the sun is dying and going to be destroyed or whatever, and the world's getting colder and nobody can do anything about it. It was basically a big event to bring Hal Jordan back to the side of good. Okay? If you don't know, Hal Jordan, he went evil after the reign of Superman, became Parallax, was causing a lot of problems. They kind of wanted to bring Hal Jordan back and have him be a good guy again. So basically what happens is is while the sun is dying and dead and the earth is going cold, the specter goes and merges with Mother Gaia and the earth and keeps her alive through his strength, so the earth can survive. And Hal Jordan ends up basically sacrificing himself and reigniting the sun, and that's the final night event. So after the final night event, the specter is kind of really weak, but he's got to go do the big showdown anyways. Unbeknownst known to him, the national interest found out where the Spear of Destiny was, and they retrieved it using that alien battle suit from the comet or the asteroid or whatever out of space. So they have it, and they're finally able to create a new version of Shadrach. So they create a new version of Shadrach. So Shadrach is going, and his group is going to go battle the spirits of the dead Indians and the other the live Indians. So Shadrach resurrects a bunch of zombie cowboys to help him fight them. So then you basically end up having this real big fight between Nate Kane and the Spectre. Are kind of get in the middle between Shadrach, the Indians, and the cowboys. So basically what happens is, in the end, the national interest is able to get all the pieces of the talisman because they weaken the Spectre. They hit him with the Spear of Destiny, and it weakens the Spectre very much. Doesn't kill him, but it really weakens him. And they're able to resurrect their version of Uncle Sam, but it's the American Scream. And it's gone crazy, and it's killing everything. And then the alien who finally remembers he's the soul of the original founder, turns on the national interest group, and they finally defeat Shadrach, who became the American Scream. Yeah, he became the American Scream through the power of the talisman. Eventually, the Indian spirits and the cowboy spirits go back to being at rest. The national interest group is defeated. The American Scream is defeated, but they leave in there like, for now. You never know when it can come back. The national interest is kind of disbanded. Nate and the Spectre are still kind of friends, but the Spectre is really, really weak now from having to keep the planet alive and then being hit by the Spear of Destiny. And so that is basically the 4th year. Yeah, like I said before, there are good ideas in here, and some of the aspects of the story are pretty good. And his take on the revisionist of American history and the icons that have come out through American history, like Johnny Reb, the Minuteman, Uncle Sam, is actually pretty damn interesting. I like it. However, as a whole, this year would be not that good. It is awfully preachy. Ugh. Look, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. I'm just saying that I think this storyline is just the weakest of the series. And it was just basically an opportunity for John to kind of get out all his thoughts and political ideas and kind of tie them in with comic books and kind of give a message. He was never heavy-handed about it. And he never browbeat you about it. And most of the time he did present both sides of the story, but you could tell which way he was leaning. But it's not like he would, criticize you or make you put something in there that where if you didn't agree with the way he was leaning, it would make you be stupid or racist or something like that. But the story was pretty convoluted. The best part of the story was actually the whole history of the talisman and that kind of stuff, and the icons it represented. And I thought that the Shadrach part was actually pretty cool. he was pretty menacing at the beginning, um, even though he really didn't need to be. But the some of the hokiness is just some of the plots and storylines really felt bad, and then like I said, it felt lazy sometimes. You know, him just not healing Nate, Jim being friends with black people and Native Americans as to not be considered racist. You know, while everybody else kind of was around him at that time. Um, it's just he wrote things. I just think he just wrote things to put the politics above the story, and it just made it seem lazy. Like I said, this is the most controversial thing, but it's not. As much as I harp about it, it's not terrible. I can read it still and still see the glimmers of good ideas and stuff in there. So, The Haunting of America, folks, on the Spectre, it does make you question things. I will say that. If his whole point was to make you question things, then yeah, it makes you question things. But you either are kind of like, ugh, or you either think about it. It's love or hate. And like I said, DC would promote this series because it was a new starting point, and it kind of was. And however, I did know some people that kind of walked away from the series at that point. And it's like, this is getting kind of, it's boring. There's a lot of goofiness in it. I read the Spectre to see supernatural stuff. I understand an issue or two, but man, you know, this whole long storyline with really only a few supernatural things thrown in there, you know, it didn't work. But then again, if you read it, you may like it because, you know, it does bring up some points. But no way am I saying that it's anything like the SJW stuff of today. Okay, it's nowhere near like that. Okay, I just think the story suffers a little bit. But that again is The Haunting of America, year 4. Next up, we're getting into year 5, the final season storyline, whatever you want, of the 3rd Spectre series. So until then, have fun.